Welcome to Respiration Part 2. At the end of the first video, we were talking about the first part of glycolysis. So, the first part of glycolysis is often called the investment phase because two molecules of ATP have been used to phosphorylate a molecule of glucose. Now, as I said before, significantly, we have a now symmetrical molecule. The next phase of glycolysis is called the payoff phase. And in the payoff phase, the first step is that hexose 1,6-bisphosphate is split into two different molecules. Now, each of those molecules is a triose phosphate. Now, the triose phosphates then are converted into a bisphosphate. But you don't need to know anything about that step. So we have a, if you like, triose bisphosphate. You don't need to know anything about that. Now let's talk a little bit about why it's bisphosphate, not bi or diphosphate. So if we look back at hexose 1,6-bisphosphate, we have two phosphate groups, and each phosphate group is on a different carbon of the molecule, which is why it has this unusual name, which is bisphosphate. So triose phosphate has one carbon, so if I split that molecule of hexose 1,6-bisphosphate straight down the middle, then I have a molecule with three carbons, which makes it a triose phosphate. A phosphate group, which makes it phosphate. So in this step that you need to know nothing about in terms of details, you get an extra phosphate added. So now I have a bisphosphate of each of those three carbon sugars. Now, I really want to emphasize this three carbon business because later on we're going to talk quite a lot about carbons, and it's really very significant. So the next step is a conversion through quite a long process, and there are lots of different steps, many of which you don't need to know anything about, into something called pyruvate. And pyruvate is the last part of glycolysis. It has three carbons, so we've not lost any carbons, but we have lost 2 ATP. So it means that during the process of conversion, I have taken ADP and converted it into ATP twice for each of those triose bisphosphates. So that happens for both of them. ATP. So it means that I in total get 4 ATP made as a consequence of glycolysis. I also get something called reduced NAD. So NAD becomes NADH plus, and let's talk about this molecule NAD. So I get two of those of reduced NAD. So let's talk about what the word reduced means. So reduced is related to the chemical term reduction or gained electrons. And NAD is a molecule that is a big name, and I'll tell you the name, but you don't need to remember it. But the molecule is called nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. And all that does is it's a mobile electron carrier. And what that means is that it will accept the electrons from that reaction and it will carry them somewhere else. So this plays a really big role in the electron transport chain, which we will talk about much later. So the second part involves the cleavage of hexose 1,6-bisphosphate into two triose phosphate molecules, which then become triose bisphosphates, so they each have two phosphate groups. The hexose 1,6-bisphosphate has 6 carbons. It becomes two 3-carbon molecules. And it remains as a 3-carbon molecule, so no carbons are lost during this point. And glycolysis ends in the molecule pyruvate. It would be helpful if I could spell pyruvate correctly. But there we go. So ends in the molecule pyruvate, which then will get taken forward to do other reactions.